G'day and welcome to Media Tech Talk. I'm David Richards.
And I'm Paul Luckett. Coming up next on Media Tech Talk, meet Jonah Goodhart, a serial media entrepreneur and investor whose work has helped define what measurement, attention, and trust mean in digital advertising. He co-founded Moat, the attention analytics pioneer acquired by Oracle, and has backed over 100 startups along the way. Today, as co-founder and CEO of Mobian, Jonah is leading a bold reimagining of contextual intelligence, moving beyond keywords to understand nuance, emotion, tone, and content fit at scale.
And his team just secured a strategic integration with Fox Advertising in the US to embed AI-powered measurement into their coverage media platform. What if your ads could sense where they truly belong, not just where they could show? Stay tuned. What Jonah shares next may reflect everything we thought we knew about media, context, and what comes after identity. Jonah, thanks for being here and joining us here on Media Tech Talk. How are you?
My pleasure. Hey, David, thanks for having me, guys.
Really great to have you on the show. Now, to start with, can you take us back to a time in your early days and how you first found yourself drawn into advertising and media technology?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty happen chance. So I've been in the space now 27 years. So I got started when I was in college. So take you back to the late 1990s. I had a little bit more hair back then. I was a student at Cornell University, which is in upstate New York. And the internet was a new thing, right? So we go through these moments, I think, in history, and we don't always know the significance of those moments at the time. But I think this was one where even then people were publicly saying this is a very, very big deal and something different is happening. And so the internet had really gotten started in 94, 95, 96. And so I started college in 96. So at that point it was like, all right, this internet thing is real. And there were companies being created, but I was just a kid. I was going to school. I actually didn't own a computer when I started college. I was on full financial aid, working at a computer center in order to have access to the internet, to high-speed internet at the time, and noticed this thing taking off. And my brother, 2 years older than me, Noah, was also, both my older brothers actually went to Cornell, but Noah was still in school there when I started. And we sort of started this conversation that it would be fun to kind of build something in the internet, in this new world. And what I would say is I was fascinated by the technology. I was fascinated about this idea of connectivity, that you could sort of communicate, across more than just an ocean. I'm talking to you, you're in Australia, I'm in the United States, and I can see you, and it's real time. And so this was literally the idea back then, right? That one day you'll be able to do this. And I think what's fascinating about it is that not only I'll tell you sort of what our early business was, but not only did almost everything that people said back then come true, it included both the good things and arguably the bad ones. People said, you're going to learn a lot more and be able to get information at the tip of your fingers, and that can lead to good things and in some cases not so good. But I was just a kid who was excited by the potential of this technology and felt like it's going to change the world, and I wanted to be a part of it. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to build a business. My oldest brother, Josh, had actually built a offline media company. He built a newspaper and then eventually built a magazine. And so I had watched him a bit. So I saw, okay, this is how you build a business, and you come up with an idea, and this is what you do. But I didn't, in reality, know how to do any of those things. And so, it was sort of happen chance was how we got into the space. To be honest, we ended up discovering that there was companies who were trying to get online themselves, bring their products to market. Companies like Pets.com, NextCard, the internet's first credit card, Essential.com, Drugstore.com, et cetera. And as part of their marketing efforts, they would give away their products, which sounds a little bit crazy, but they would literally say, your first purchase is free. Because you have to remember, at that time, the idea was, I don't want to put my credit card into this online thing. Somebody's going to immediately steal it, and I'm going to be responsible for it. And so they had to get people over that hump. And the way they did was they said, literally, we'll give you your first product for free, because when you try it, you're gonna love it. And we discovered that they were giving away these products, that it was a form of marketing, and we long story short, sort of backed into building a business to help promote some of these companies. And we ended up kind of teaching ourselves how to do marketing, how to do media buying, how to build creative, how to build landing pages, how to code. All of those things were things we didn't know when we got started. And it led to really a career for me in advertising, which I'm humbled and feel really good that that happened to be the area that I went into. But I can't say that I set out and took marketing classes and said this is the path I'm going to go. It wasn't anything like that. It was much more happen chance.
Where do you sit in the world of coding? Like back in the, don't get me wrong, the HTML back in the 90s was pretty raw, and there wasn't that much around as far as self-help solutions. How did you get into that space, and obviously moving into Java and everything else that came after?
Yeah, so back at the time, I would say, a very basic coder. I could do, HTML. I could maybe, write a line of JavaScript or something in the early days of that technology. I was fascinated by it to the point that I would say I could understand the concept. I would tell people throughout my career, I think it's critical to understand these concepts because programming concepts are a little bit different than how other things work. And once you get the sort of core concepts, you can kind of understand anything for the most part. But I spent the first several decades of my career not coding, not being in the weeds, other than being able to understand the concept. I understand how a redirect works or understand how attribution works, etc. Fast forward with AI, I'm actually coding again, strangely enough, because AI has enabled me to do far more complex things. And so, out of passion and fun, I'm building databases and writing algorithms and doing all sorts of things that I just find fascinating. Partially because now you can, and it was something that I couldn't do for so long, and so I'm sort of a kid in the candy shop in a sense that wow, I can go do some of these things that I could have never done because of the level of complexity that this stuff has gotten to. So the idea that I can actually do some of it now is super fun.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of people saying something similar. And dare I say, AI, like GPT as an example, has probably democratized coding and opportunities or access into the space of being more creative and in the development field. What's your view on that?
100% agree. Yeah, I mean, the idea that I can go into a client meeting, have a conversation, prototype something myself. One of my teammates can prototype. I can share, an idea. Oh, I thought about this. Have we thought about doing it this way? It absolutely democratizes it. And frankly, from a communication standpoint, I can have conversations now with the help of AI that I couldn't have done before. So I can understand, we all have this thing where I think everyone has a thing where you don't want to be embarrassed, you don't want to say the wrong thing, you don't want to say you don't understand something, and so then you tend to just say, okay, this is above my pay grade. I'm not going to comment on this. But if we're sort of real, we would say, well, explain this to me like I have a 10-year-old son. Explain this to me like I'm a 10-year-old, and I can hopefully understand it. Not all of us feel comfortable doing that. I know for many years, and I would say now I'm more comfortable doing that, but for many years of my career, I probably would not have said, I don't understand this at all. Can you explain this to me? But I would now. But with AI, you can do that privately, right? You can say, hey, I'm really not getting this concept. Can you explain to me how a database row level security works? Can you explain to me how whatever you're looking at works? And AI will have patience and will take time and will go through it with you in detail. That I think is exactly what you said. It's democratizing, and I think it's going to change software. It's going to change innovation. It's going to change productivity. I think we are just at the beginnings of that. And by the way, for any engineers out there, I actually think it makes engineers more important, not less important. I think it simply brings more people into the fold. But great engineers I've always thought of great engineers like athletes, like an NBA all-star. And there is a 10x difference between certain people's ability and others, and sometimes it's just a natural thing, and you know it when you see it. And I think those folks are even more valuable. And that's why we're seeing Meta and other companies sort of pay top dollar to get access to talent. It's become, the NBA or NFL or soccer or whatever sports analogy you want to use, but it's become something pretty akin to that.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I think the democratization, I think, is an interesting point. I'd say it's like I agree with your point that software engineers are just as valuable, if not more, for the time being as at the moment. For people who don't know anything about coding, it's allowing them to kind of build easy things, simple things. For people who know a little bit about coding, or like you say, understand the concepts, they know enough to be pretty dangerous now with an AI tool, with a cloud or something like that. But for the software engineers out there, it's a force multiplier, allowing them to do 10 times more in terms of coding than what they could have beforehand. So, yeah, I think it's an exciting time for everybody in that space.
And it's real. It's not, so much of technology, I think, always feels theoretical to
Mm.
people. Yeah, I get it, but what is in reality, what's this going to do? I think this one's actually real. Like I literally can create something that I couldn't have done before. And so and I can see people use it. And that's a real thing that didn't exist.
What percentage of your workday includes AI? If you were to put in a linear format from, 1 to 10, all the stuff that you do that's related to work, what on the scale would be AI for you?
I mean, we're an AI first company is how we think about it. So every problem that we try to solve, the first question we ask is how can we do this with AI? So our instinct is to try to jam everything through an AI pipeline as possible because we think that's how we learn. And so everything from how we craft a set of code to how we think about a problem or a market dynamic, we're AI everything. I tell my team I want to have everything be AI enabled, and there'll be certain things that we say it doesn't make sense, and you see that, but you only see that when you get really, really close to it, so much so that you go, okay, it's not so good at this part of it yet, or it's not so good at that part. If you're too far away from it, though, you don't see those things. My oldest brother has a great quote, which he says that when you really, really are close to a technology or to a company or to an area, things begin to move in slow motion. And I really think that's true. I think that when if you spend 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day with AI, you're going to see things that other people aren't seeing that feel like, oh, wow, how did you know that? Well, you just spend a lot of time doing it. But as a result, it's going to feel like you started to see the development of things before others who aren't spending their day doing that. So I would say it's a lot, and it's come a long way. It's not perfect. There's a lot of areas that there's still massive improvement to happen. But the speed at which it's changing is pretty phenomenal. And if you take a moment and you're looking at one model, a new model comes out from someone else, and it changes the thing that you thought was a limiting factor of the existing model. I haven't seen a time in my lifetime with the development of technology go quite so fast. It's
Mhm.
it's it's pretty phenomenal to see what can be done at this point.
I'm gonna take a step back in time. Let's go back to the days of DoubleClick because I've been reading Ari's book Yield, and you pop up in the book and talking about how a hack was applied to DoubleClick, where where you and your brother Noah were able to apply this hack and basically change the way the ad server operated. Do you want to take us through that and how that came about?
Sure, and I don't know if I would characterize it as a hack, but here's
Right.
here's the story. Here's what happened.
Yeah.
We had started a company, Happen Chance, as I mentioned earlier, and we were buying media. And we were buying media because Mike Walrath called us and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about buying display ads, banner ads?" He said they're on every website in the world, and websites are the thing now. And so if you buy banner ads and you make them work, there's a big business there. And so we thought that's super interesting. He's right. It has scale. You can run them on every website of the world. And so we started testing with him, and we literally, gave him a credit card and built some ads and built some landing pages, and he ran them in DoubleClick, and we saw the results for our clients, and we thought this is fascinating. And we saw when we made creative changes, as an example, that creative was highly impactful to the results of a campaign, that what websites ads ran on were highly impactful to the performance of that campaign. And so we started learning by just doing. But what happened is DoubleClick was really built as a sort of simple ad server. The idea of DoubleClick was, you have a bunch of assets of creative, and I'm going to show them on the page in a particular set of priorities. This one first, then this one. But in order to figure out priorities, it had to have inputs like, well, when does your campaign start? So I only can look at campaigns that are running during this time period. Well, what is your campaign targeting? Am I allowed to run the ad for this brand on this web page? What's the format? Does that format exist on this page? So on and so forth. And so there were all of these concepts that DoubleClick had around priority and sort of the prioritization of which ad to serve when. One of the things that I think Mike, as being an expert user of DoubleClick on the sell side, figured out is that you could get very smart about how you prioritize what ads to run when. And in our case, we were a unique client in that when it worked, we wanted virtually unlimited volume because our clients were companies like Columbia House Records and BMG Music Service and Doubleday Books, who basically said, we are direct response companies. And that means when we get a customer at this price, we know we make money. And so we will take, as many customers as you can send us at that price. And so we knew that we had buyers on the other side who were saying, we'll take unlimited volume. And so we would say to Mike, there's no cap. We will take as much volume as you can send that will deliver us performance. And so then it was Mike's job to figure out, all right, how do I set up these campaigns literally in the nuances of DoubleClick settings? How do I set up these campaigns to get them to deliver such that it will generate money for DoubleClick, generate money for Mike as a commissioned sales guy at the time, and ultimately work for all of us. And so he really just became an expert at leveraging the settings well. And it's funny. There's a company called Adfidance, and he's building settings optimization, settings verification. And I actually think this is going to be, Jacek is his name, really smart guy. I think this is actually going to be a big industry because, AI is going to get involved and automate more of this. But settings are ironically a far bigger player than I think we give them credit to. What I mean by that is things like default settings, right? What is your default browser? What is your default search engine? Settings actually matter a lot because people don't often mess with the settings. What are your default privacy settings? So these things matter. And so if you get good in an enterprise world of figuring out what are the right settings to help drive success for a client, which is what Mike did, it can make a big impact. And then what Mike saw from that was that, there's not really an auction inside DoubleClick at the time. They hadn't built the auction business that they went on to sort of famously eventually build. And he thought, it's essentially sort of simple ad serving with a priority system. What if we turned that into a dynamic auction? What if we had, buyers and sellers and different goals, and my company could say, here's what our goal is. And what if we could almost in a sort of live auction environment take bids and create a marketplace or an exchange? And this was, frankly, before a lot of these people were that we now know as these sort of ad tech titans, my friend Ari Paparo and others who have big names in the space. This was before they were doing it, actually. We were buying media in the late 1990s, and most of these folks weren't doing this. And so we saw some of the beginnings of some of these issues, and I think Mike in particular saw an opportunity to improve, and he would eventually go start a company, start Right Media. We were a big partner in that first client. We helped fund it. And that really, in a lot of ways, started some of the programmatic space. But there were also other super interesting companies that, I don't know, I haven't read the book yet, but I don't know if they talk about AdECN. But AdECN is another fascinating company. This is Jeff Green's first company. A lot of people don't know that Jeff Green, for Trade Desk, he started AdECN before that, sold it to Microsoft, Avenue A, another company. Back in the day, but there were some formative companies that eventually kind of gave way to what would become the programmatic world that we all live in.
Yeah, there is a mention of ECN. I'm just having a look at the book now. So yes, definitely a mention in there. But yeah, I love it. I think your legacy, obviously, for programmatic is pretty big in this point of impact. It obviously now plays out. You've built and backed several companies. Moat. I can never say it right. Is it Moat or Moat?
Moat, yeah,
Moat. It is Moat.
Like,
you know what?
It's like a moat around a castle.
Thank you. I don't know. Somebody said it to me when I first heard it, and I've always got it back to front. Right Media, obviously, as well. In the Moat space, how does that come around for you in obviously finding a problem and a solution, and obviously where it ended up with Oracle?
I mean, so a couple of things. So first of all, what I found is that our businesses, and maybe I'm just, this is how it works for us, or we're not good at the initial idea or something, but the businesses that I start tend to iterate. They tend to evolve. And so Moat started with a different idea. Mobian somewhat started with a different idea, and they evolved. Moat started as a crowdsourced creative marketplace, and then it evolved into a measurement company because we saw a problem. And the problem we saw was that this idea of viewability, which we didn't invent, but we noticed it and we thought this was a very important idea. The idea that when you buy an ad, it should show up on the page that you buy it on, was being used as a sort of a hammer against publishers. And so you had great companies creating great content who were being told by these they called them verification companies, that you are stealing money from advertisers, and we are here to get it back. Is what they said. And we saw this and we thought, this is a problem. Viewability is a problem, but also the way these folks are going to market is a problem. That's not how I would want to be dealt with if I'm, selling ad inventory. And so we went into the market and we said, maybe we can help publishers, not, accuse them of things. Maybe we can help them navigate this thoughtfully. I do think it's a real issue. I do think it's a real problem. But I don't think that intent was negative. Let's help publishers navigate. We went out and worked with virtually every major U.S. publisher at the time, and built a client base of 1,000+ clients, and ended up working with advertisers as well. And my viewpoint is that as a measurement company, which is what Moat ultimately was and what Mobian is, we want to work with everybody. We want to provide what we provide as a service. We don't want to buy or sell media. That's a philosophical thing that we really take issue with for measurement. We think that if you are a measurement company and you collect the money from the advertiser, then you're a demand side platform. You're a DSP essentially, and you are selling their inventory. You're buying inventory for them. Your incentive is to say that the way you're buying inventory works, and vice versa. If you're an SSP, then you're collecting money and on the sell side, and your incentives align there. That's fine. I have no problem with each side having their own incentives. But as a measurement company, I don't want to be in a position where I have to say a certain type of inventory was successful because that's the inventory I represent. And when you see these companies that do measurement, for example, on a walled garden, and they say, we do measurement on the walled garden, but we also are a managed service on that inventory. What does that mean? That means that they sell that inventory. And usually it means they only sell that inventory for a lot of these companies. And so they're never going to tell you that don't buy that platform, it's not working for your goals. They're going to tell you, of course it works. And so my feeling is that measurement needs to be different. Measurement needs to be independent, and that's why it can operate sort of in the lane of Nielsen and Kantar and some of these companies that support both sides of an ecosystem, and that's how we see it.
And talk a little bit about, if you can, about the Grapeshot acquisition and how that kind of led into the evolving nature of as an organization.
Yeah, so we had been, growing on our own prior to the Oracle acquisition. We experienced pretty tremendous growth. We had grown to, just before the acquisition, we were nearing $100 million run rate as a company. We were profitable. We had sort of some gave us credit for pioneering the SaaS pricing model in the advertising technology space. And that was great. We made it easy for people to sign up, and we made it predictable in terms of what people's costs would be. And that, I think, was a benefit to our clients, and it helped us as well. And so Oracle saw this, and in particular, a company at Oracle, Datalogics, which Oracle had bought not too long before, said, "Hey, we think this is super interesting for what we want to do, and we think that you could be interesting as part of the Oracle family." And so we ended up, going down a process and talked to a bunch of different companies. Oracle was ultimately the right decision for us. We had been working with Grapeshot prior to that, and so we had, this area of brand safety was a topic of discussion starting around 2016, 2017. And so we thought, well, we don't do this as a company. We could build it maybe, but there's another company that does it, and they were Grapeshot, a company out of the UK. And so we thought, that's interesting. Well, as a starting place, let's integrate with them and see if it makes sense. And so we did an integration prior to selling to Oracle. We did an integration with Grapeshot where when we offered brand safety capabilities, it was all powered by this company, Grapeshot. So Oracle buys us in 2017, and then ultimately we buy Grapeshot post our acquisition, and it becomes sort of a fully part of the suite. Interesting thing with the Oracle story, I learned a lot, and I had a really, in the end, looking back on it, I had a really positive experience. I think if you'd asked me then, I would have had a variety of different viewpoints working in a big company for the first time, et cetera. But in retrospect, it was actually one of the best experiences of my business life. I come out of that at the end of 2019. Fast forward a bunch of years, and Oracle decides to shut down the entire division, not specific to our company. Our company Moat was still doing great and still had lots of clients and was profitable, et cetera. But they made a decision that big companies do sometimes, that they just didn't want to be in the ad space. And they, I think they correctly saw this AI trend coming, and they saw the potential positive impact it would have on their business, which it has in a massive way. And I think they saw some of the stuff in the ad industry around audience buying and brokering and some of the things that we didn't do as a company, but other companies that were in our division did, as potentially just not being where they strategically wanted to be as a company. And so they decided, one earnings call, they announced they're shutting down the business, shutting down the whole division. And they just did, and they shut it down. They said, we're done with that, and we're focusing on AI. And hard to argue with their numbers and with their scale and progress. But I think it was a little bit sad for me in one sense, that I felt like, okay, this thing that we built is now literally going to get shut down. Like, tags are going to be turned off. But it also, I think, gave me the drive to want to go build again in the space, and to feel like, okay, I'm not going to be stepping on anybody's toes from our previous company, because it doesn't exist anymore. And so sort of have the freedom to go build again. And I felt like there is now, I feel like there is now, and I felt like there was then, a big opportunity in advertising, and particularly measurement. This advertising industry, I think the thing that people miss or maybe underappreciate in advertising is that it's a very, very big industry in terms of dollars, and it has a huge impact on the world. So when I started, there was a total of about $1 billion being spent in digital advertising. That was the total global ad spend, was about $1 billion in the late 1990s. Fast forward today, it's over 700 billion. So 700x in a couple decades in terms of spend. That is a massive shift, and we've gone from being just a tiny fraction of media dollars to virtually all of them, or at least the majority of media dollars. And now we get to a place where everything is digital, and so even the concept of what we would call a magazine or radio or TV is all digital anyways. It's digital out of home, not just out of home, et cetera. So everything's digitized at this point. And so the spend eventually becomes all digital. And in that world where you have, nearly $1 trillion or coming up on $1 trillion of spend in digital, the question is, how do you measure it? And is it important to measure it? Does that matter? And what I would argue philosophically is, you can't improve something you don't measure. You can't improve something you don't measure. So you got to measure it if you want to make it better. And so with, again, coming up on $1 trillion in spend is projected in the next couple of years, that's not all efficient. That doesn't all work for every brand. And so how do you make that better? How do you make that better if you're a seller of ad inventory, you're a publisher, you're a creator of content, you get audiences to pay attention. How do you make that better if you're a buyer of inventory? You have a product and you're trying to get it in front of the right audience. And so measurement is absolutely critical to the success of that ecosystem. And so I became, really in love with this idea of measuring advertising and measuring digital, and decided to devote a significant portion of my life to it. But the other thing I would say is sort of maybe missed is that Google doesn't exist without advertising. Meta doesn't exist without advertising. So what's the impact of that? Google Maps is the impact of that. WhatsApp, probably use WhatsApp, is the impact of that. Instagram is the impact of that. Gmail is the impact of, I mean, AI, all of the AI intelligence in terms of people, a lot of it, maybe not all of it, a lot of it came out of Google. It was, Demis and DeepMind and some of the sort of original thinkers, Hinton and others in this area that really kicked off this whole world of AI as we know it today. That wouldn't be possible without Google, and that wouldn't be possible without them having financial resources to do it, which wouldn't be possible without advertising. Meta literally producing a open source model in Llama is entirely based on the fact that 99% of their now, call it $200 billion run rate business, 99% is digital advertising. And so it is entirely funded by advertising. And so when you look at it through that lens, you go, okay, advertising funds AI. AI maybe doesn't exist without advertising. Advertising, certainly, we knew advertising funded media, we knew advertising funded content creation, we knew it funded the apps ecosystem and the internet and all these other things. But now you're saying advertising essentially funds AI, and not, putting ads necessarily integrated into AI, although that is certainly coming. But the idea that it doesn't exist without it, it's a pretext, if you will, I think is absolutely critical. And I think most people don't get that.
Where do you see AI in the future with what you do? And there's a two-part to this question, because I see, as you've just mentioned, the platforms, meaning social media platforms, play a significant part in the advertising dollar, and the technology that comes out of that as a result of the investment that advertisers are making. Where do you see that taking us into the future? Are we going to get more transparency for publishers of, I want to call it professionally created content versus user-generated content? And are we going to see like a balancing of universal insights that can compare fairly between those social media and professionally, created content platform environments?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually perhaps introduce a different lens to look at this through, which is we've sort of accepted this idea of walled gardens. I was talking to a big advertiser the other day, and I was saying it's sort of funny how we kind of just say, well, yeah, you have walled gardens and you have the open web. Why do we accept this as a concept? Like who has named these companies as walled gardens? It's why is, a certain network that produces content in the television space, as an example, has hundreds of millions of users, has billions in revenue. Why are they not a walled garden? While someone else who has maybe, a billion in revenue or 2 billion in revenue and a bunch of users, why are they get that title of walled garden? I don't exactly know how we sort of concluded that works. I think we've evolved to this sort of funny place. I think it has a lot to do with incentives. So I think companies would like to be walled gardens because I think it gives them a freedom to sort of do certain things in market that otherwise they wouldn't perhaps be able to do. But I think we're going to start maybe questioning some of these concepts. And so I think the real question is less of, a walled garden versus everyone else. The model that companies like Google and Meta have pushed have worked. That's just a fact. They've worked, and they've worked at scale. The question is really, in the future, how is content creation, which by and large Meta and Google don't do, how is content creation, which is still the reason humans go to those apps, is for the content, how is that industry going to change? And how is that industry going to get monetized? And how is that industry going to be distributed? That's sort of the real underlying set of questions. I think, if these were companies who created the content themselves, and they had built these sort of massive content creation companies. There are examples like that, Netflix being a great one. But most of the so-called walled gardens are not that. Most of the so-called walled gardens don't actually create their own content. They are very good user experiences, they're distribution mechanisms, they're AI optimizers, they're all sorts of things, but they're not content creators. And so I would sort of distill this down to first principles. Those companies, those platforms don't have anything without the content. And so the content is the thing that by and large is driving people to Instagram, YouTube. It's the content, not, just if it was an empty app, that wouldn't be interesting. And so what is it that is driving evolution or innovation in the content creation side? And where is that going? Where is the appetite for audiences and consumers going in terms of content? And how can people who are in the business of creating content get in front of those trends and be a part of those trends, and figure out how to monetize in a increasingly thoughtful way into that new world? And so I think that's one thing. The second thing I would say is I think AI will change just about everything. And I think this idea that AI is going to stop at like a chat bot, I think is missing the forest through the trees. AI is going to have everything we do is going to be fully integrated into AI, and for good reason. AI has the ability to be contextually intelligent. And context, I think, is an area that we spend a lot of time on, but it is the big unlock here. And I'll give you a very specific personal example. So I'm in Orlando right now. I came down to a conference down here. I live in New York City. When I was coming to the conference, on my calendar, you could see that had a flight. You could see that I had a conference that I was going to for work. You could see on my phone, if I gave you access to it, you could see that I use services like Uber and Lyft to go to the airport. If you had access to my email, you could see when I had a flight, because you could see the confirmation for the flight. You could see what hotel I was staying at. You could see a number of different pieces of information. The idea that today companies like Uber or Lyft will try to find me and advertise to me to remind me to book them, etc., feels very inefficient. If I gave you the proper access, for example, choose one, Lyft or Uber, could know that I pretty much know when he's going to go to the airport, and I pretty much know how he's going to go to the airport. And if he gives me location access, I know where he is. And I know what kind of cars he likes, and I know which ones he gives 5-star ratings and what he typically books, etc. Given that information, could I propose to him, I will have a clean 5-star, choose the model car waiting in front of your apartment at this time, at the time you like to go, at maybe a discounted price over what I might normally pay, or whatever offer the advertiser wants to present. That would be incredibly compelling. It would be contextually appropriate, and I'm not talking about it's raining, so here's an umbrella, but I'm talking about fully contextually appropriate. And I think I would say, yeah, I would take, if I was planning to take Uber and you said, here's a 5-star SUV from a top-rated driver from Lyft in this perfect car that fits all the things that we just talked about, will you take it for $20 less? Yeah, I'm in. Or vice versa? Yeah, I'm in. And I think most people would be too. And so that's the power of contextual. That's the power of understanding a person better, which is the unlock that AI has the ability to do. And so I think we are just at the beginning of what this can mean for marketers, for product builders, for advertisers. I don't think we've even tapped the surface of where this is going to go yet.
And I guess that's a perfect segue into my next question. I do want to ask a question around AI and contextual, but before I get to that, I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about Mobian and what you're doing at the moment, and kind of how that came about, and how, I guess, as well, coming from the history of the businesses that you've been a part of and founded over the years, like, how is this kind of different or an evolution of what you've done in the past?
Yeah, so I believe that life and business are always an evolution. I think that there is, this concept that things happen that are completely new, but I would make the argument, maybe it's a little too philosophical, and I'll borrow this from my dad, who's a philosopher, that nothing is really ever fully new. It's always built on something else. It's always a continuation. What we think of as difference is actually sameness at some level, is actually continuity. So we've launched a new company. At some level, it's a continuation of our old company, right? In some ways. But there are some key differences, as you bring up, which is number one, everything is AI focused for us, and AI didn't exist at least in a usable form when we were building Moat. And so the idea is, can we build a measurement company? That's our North Star. Build a measurement company that helps people make smarter decisions, drive better outcomes. That's what every measurement company should do, by the way. Can we do that leveraging the latest and greatest technology that allows us to unlock things like context? And context for us is a very, very important and fascinating area. And as it turned out, is a massive pain point for advertisers and publishers. And so what we discovered was that basically there was a problem. And the problem was the way that advertising is bought and sold today relies on contextual evaluations, or supposed contextual evaluations, of a couple of companies. Two of them happen to be so-called verification companies, but they will go out and tell an advertiser, okay, we are going to help you figure out what inventory to buy. We're going to help you filter out the stuff you don't want and just buy the stuff you do want. And those companies have built these models that, in our view, are not working, that are really predicated on an old way of looking at the world. And I'll give you the example that really got us into the space, which is that Time Magazine had an advertising campaign run on their site for a couple of major news events. One was they had named Taylor Swift Person of the Year, and they put her on the cover. And one of these companies said that content was unsafe, and that advertisers, and one in particular, shouldn't buy it. They had another example where an article talked about the violent death of a star in the sky. And one of those companies said, we thought you were talking about a violent death of a human. And so we think it's violence. And so we're going to help advertisers stay away from this content. By the way, to this day, those same companies say that same content is still unsafe, is still about violence, because they're stuck in the old way of looking at things, which was keywords and semantics and natural language processing and things that were the best we could do as an industry. I'm not blaming them for using the technology that existed at the time, but you combine sort of an old way of looking at things with what I think is a really separate issue that has nothing to do with technology, and that's a lack of transparency. And so their models don't explain why they've characterized content in a certain way. So they will take that example of a violent death of a star, and they will call it violence, but they won't explain why their model does that. So an advertiser will simply be told, we're helping you avoid violence. And they're saying, great, that was what I wanted. I didn't want to be on violence. And they're saying, yep, we're helping you avoid it. But the way they're doing that is by looking for simply keywords in that example. And that keyword is actually content that would have been great if you want to be around innovation. It was about the James Webb Telescope and beautiful images that came back from the first time of seeing literally how the universe and galaxy may have been created. Advertisers that are about innovation, as an example, missed out on that because it had the word violent or the words violent death in it. And these systems thought violent death. Uh-oh, stay away from that. And so I think you had this real pain point, which is the old contextualization framework was not and is not working. Yet today, between just the two biggest companies, there's $1.1 billion in US dollars spent annually. $1.1 billion spent annually with those two companies to make these types of decisions. And so we think that is a problem. We think there's a lot of money at stake. That's advertisers' money that they should get back, that should be driving ROI, that should be driving smarter decisions. I think it can be a lower price that they pay for these types of services, number one, but I think they can get a better service also. I think they can get more, not just more accurate, but more transparent. And I think that's the other sort of critical thing here is transparency breeds trust, and a lack of transparency, I think, breeds the opposite.
Jonah, I want to jump in on that one because the transparency is always a hard one when the publisher's being scored on content that's been created. and the advertiser has a specific set of keywords that they don't want to be around for brand safety reasons. As you explained, like a dying star does not necessarily mean that somebody as a person is dying. It could be something stellar. So how do you manage that contextual piece so that your platform is understanding the context of what's on the page, so that we've got the right brand safety measures in place?
Yeah, so there's two components to it. So the technology itself, we use a combination of technology that we've built along with AI, and we use multimodal models that allow us to read content, watch videos at the frame level, listen to audio, listen to podcasts, etc. Look at text, look at images, and AI is pretty good at it. Not perfect, but it's pretty good. And with the right sort of training data and the right framework, you can get it to work for a prototype. The question is, can you scale it? Can you integrate it into all the systems that need to be integrated in? Can you build algorithms on top of it? Can you build agentic systems that can decision autonomously off of it? There's a lot of pieces that come after that, but the core idea is to evaluate content through a smarter lens, number one. There's a second piece, though, which is we believe that it is our responsibility to provide transparency as to not just what our evaluation was, but how we got there, how we arrived there. And we're the only company today, and I can tell you why I think that might be the case, but we're the only company today that does that. We're the only fully transparent company. What that means is that when we look at a piece of content on a website, a specific URL, that Death of a Star article or an article on Newsweek or Time or Fox or Fandom, you choose, we're going to actually transparently show you how we evaluated that piece of content. And that is transparent for the publisher to see, as well as for the advertiser to see, as well as the agency and the rest of the folks in the ecosystem. And so we're willing to say, look, our model's not going to get everything right, but we're going to transparently show you how it got there. And it's going to explain, our model actually explains, here's why I said this was this risk level. We have a risk summary. We have a content summary that says, here's what we think the content's about, and this is what our evaluation is based on. We have things like emotion and sentiment and tones that help sort of form a deeper understanding of what the content was about. All of that we provide transparently, meaning we literally give it to the publisher and the advertiser to transparently see how we evaluated that content. If you look at the companies in this space, including some of the new ones that are making a whole big hoopla about agentic, they don't do that. They don't transparently provide an easy way to go look up any piece of content, see how their model worked and how it made a decision. We think that's a differentiator for us because we believe in transparency, and we think that ultimately, if we're judging someone's content through our lens, then we think it's a responsibility to be transparent about how we got there. And we think it's a miss when these other platforms don't do that.
You mentioned, beg pardon, sorry, you mentioned video frame, analytics or analyzing video by frames. Yeah. My thinking on that would be the amount of storage capacity that you would need to do that for not just processing the video, but also storing that information afterwards, as well as you just said, giving the transparency back to the publisher. How do you bring that to life?
Yeah, so I mean, one is there is massive scale. One of the large language models recently told us, thanked us, and said we've used over 1 trillion tokens with them. So yeah, there is a lot of scale.
They're gonna love you
in the internet, and that's absolutely the case. No two ways about that. That said, you don't need every frame of every video in the world to understand this is an interview, these are professional people talking, these are the people, these are the names, these are their companies. You can understand that without having every frame of every video in that case.
Are you using a keyframe methodology in this place?
It's a combination of things. So keyframe is one of them. But we also don't want to fall into a trap, which is that what the historical approach that others took is they just took 4 random frames of the video. And they said, okay, here's 4 random frames. But because of that, they can't see scenes. They can't see transitions. One of the things that we've done historically is we've looked at scene changes. So we've looked at literally the brightness as an example and the movement of a scene you can see in camera shots, et cetera, And that tells us, oh, there's something interesting to look at here. We see that with audio changes. You can see decibel levels change, and that tells us there might be something interesting to look at here. And so we've built if you will, an inspection technology to understand what content we need to look more closely at and what content we can sort of let go by. And that's part of the secret sauce of not having to process every single image of every single frame of every single video in the world. But we do need a methodology that allows us to be frame level. And I think that's critical in my view. It's why, for example, the companies that are the big verification companies don't offer emotion measurement on platforms like the big walled gardens, because they don't have the data and they don't have technology that's able to see that data. And so as a result, I think it creates a disconnect in both the technology that they have and that they're bringing to market, as well as I said, I think that the transparency is another important key. There's one more, which is methodology. And methodology, I think, is important. So if you think about technology, all right, frame level, how do you understand audio in context, et cetera? Got it. If you think about transparency, got it. You can understand what Mobian's model is because we share it with you. That makes sense. What about methodology? What is methodology? Well, methodology would say that if this content is spoken about on one site versus another, or one platform versus another, the meaning of that content could change. How is that possible? Let me explain. If, for example, you are talking about a subject that you're not an expert in, and you're not a journalist, and you're not a professional content creator on a particular subject, and you're just putting up a YouTube video talking about that, that is one meaning for that content. If, however, the Washington Post does a deep dive on a topic and they write a really in-depth piece on the economics of that particular thing that they're looking at, the meaning of them doing it actually is quite different. And the quality, by the way, could be the same in both cases. You could have very high quality insights from you and very high quality insights from the Washington Post. But the fact that it's from the Washington Post actually means something, and it changes the meaning for the consumer who's on the other side of this. They go, well, the Washington Post put that out. That was on the front page of the Washington Post. That has its own contextual meaning. And so we think that's an important part of methodology. We think the meaning of content changes, literally can change based on who's saying it and what site it's on. As an example, I'll give you an easier example, which is the word tariffs, right? There's a lot of talk about this word tariffs. If I say something about tariffs, it means nothing. Who cares? Some ad guy. Why does that matter? But if our president of the United States says something about tariffs, or a high-level political official in Australia says something about tariffs, that means a lot, actually. That has implications for your entire country and mine. And so the meaning of a word literally changes, not just by the word, but by literally who says it, and what environment you see it in. So those are things that I think are not captured at all in this other approach. So technology, transparency, and methodology are absolutely critical.
Can I ask you, there's one key word I want to bring up in this conversation, the word Fox.
Let's do it.
What does that mean to
Fox.
you? Yeah.
Fox, yeah. Well, I think about Fox Corporation and a great partnership that we just announced recently with Fox. And Fox, of course, is Fox Entertainment and Fox Sports and Fox News and Tubi and all sorts of assets that they have in the world. Look, we saw and see this as a big opportunity for media companies that create content that attract hundreds of millions of people, of audiences at scale globally, to figure out how to do this better. And one of the things that makes me quite proud about Fox and our partnership with them is that they were willing to lean forward and they were willing to publicly say, this is not okay, the way that the ecosystem was going, and we are going to do it differently. And if you ultimately want to, make a change in a space, you need big companies who are willing to put themselves out there and say that they want to do things differently. And so Fox did that and did it in a very public way, and they're a great partner of ours. There's another company on the advertiser side, Prudential Financial, a big financial company, who came out publicly and said, we are also using Mobian, and we've seen phenomenal results with it. They publicly talked about something like a 50% increase in ROI as a result of the work that they're doing with us. That is phenomenally important because it is a signal to others who are advertisers and others who are publishers that You can do this. Others are doing it. We can make a difference. We can make progress, and we can see the world change as a result. And by the way, Prudential, I'll tell you a quick story about Prudential, which is that I was in Atlanta, Georgia, visiting my brother, and my dad came into town for his birthday. He was turning 79. My mom was there, and both of my brothers, and we did something fun. We went to a vintage bookstore, and we went to see what old books looked like. And one of the things this vintage bookstore had in Atlanta was old magazines. And so I picked up an old magazine from 65 years ago. I picked up Life magazine, which is a big magazine in the US. It actually happened to be Time Life magazine, was what it used to be called. So it has a through line to all the way to Time Inc. today, but Life magazine. And in this book, I was just flipping through the magazine. There was an ad, and the ad happened to be for Prudential. And Prudential, in this 65-year-old ad, talked about protection of children, talked about protection of the things that matter most to you in life. And as you have more kids, we should be protecting those kids and thinking about the future through that lens, et cetera. And so I thought, wow, that's fascinating. Fast forward, Prudential's current ads, 65 years later, they're totally different format. They run in totally different places. They're video ads, not physical magazine ads, but they talk about protecting children, protecting our kids for the future, hold on to the things that matter most, etc. And what occurred to me is that the brand itself, it didn't really change. The essence of the story that Prudential is telling doesn't really change. And that the power of Prudential is all of the great services they have, but it's also their brand and the trust that people have in that brand. And so for me, what we're doing in a lot of ways is the same thing that companies have done for 65 years or more. We're helping Prudential find ways to tell their story that's going to ultimately help their brand and ultimately drive customers and hopefully happy customers to them in the end of the day. And so none of that changes with any of the things that we're talking about. All of that is exactly the same. And I think that's really critical in the end of the day. So we're doing the same thing we've done forever. We have different tools, different mechanics. Yes, the ads are going to be totally different and I think are going to work even better than we've ever imagined. But we're still storytelling. That's what advertising is in the end of the day. And we're excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, look, I think this. Sorry, mate.
Yeah.
Just a quickie. I think there's a really important piece on that as well, and what you're saying around managing and the quality of ads from a measurement perspective. But back in the days when you read that magazine when it was published, editors or the editorial team would largely look after the ad quality going out to market, and it was easier because it was not at the scale that we see today. And I think the reason why we need companies like Mobian in there is because we've got so much scale. There is not one person that can do this job anymore. Everything is just moving so much faster, and having your AI technology in there is obviously going to support that change.
Yeah, with that comes opportunity, right? I mean, back in the day, you would choose where you wanted to be in the magazine. You would choose, the back cover. In TV, you would choose the pod, maybe. You choose maybe the TV show. In digital, it's much more dynamic. And so with that comes, you're right, complexity. But it also comes an opportunity that is different. For example, packaging inventory based on emotion is one of those unlocks. I think emotion is one of the biggest unlocks of an AI first world that ironically, AI, I don't think itself is emotional. We humans are emotional, but I think AI can identify emotion in content, emotion in people, and can help make smarter decisions about things like emotion and tone and sentiment. And these sort of features are a different lens to look at the world through. And so as a marketer, as an advertiser, Prudential can look at the world through the lens of sentiment and tone and emotion, which is different than how they've been able to sort of slice the world historically. And so I think that is not just fascinating. I think it's going to lead to ROI, to return on investment, to better numbers, to more efficient campaigns, and ultimately advertising will continue funding and fueling much of the economies of the world. And I think these types of technologies are simply going to help it do that.
I know we're out of time. Final question from me. I think the 15 years I've been in the industry, there's things have evolved, things have changed. The conversations continually change. But if there's one common through line, I'd say that's been consistent throughout my entire career is this ongoing conversation about measurement and attribution. Seems like it's just as much of an important topic today as it was 15 years ago. I mean, the IAB dedicates whole councils to it, whole full day events to it. Do you think, I mean, it seems like we figure it out for some areas and then we have to figure it out for other areas, like CTV is a big one right now with measurement and attribution. Where do you think we are today in terms of that broader topic? And do you think we'll ever have it figured out, so to speak?
So I don't think we're ever going to fully solve all of measurement because I think there's always going to be factors that we can't anticipate. And so I think we can get and are getting much smarter. And so some of the latest technology is doing things like predictive outcomes and leveraging synthetic panels and doing all sorts of as I was talking about, understanding and decoding emotion, building personas, using agentic systems to autonomously decision. We are certainly making really solid progress, but complexity continues to go up as well. There's a virtually unlimited number of places for an advertiser to advertise. Can they advertise on your phone? Yep. Can they advertise on a TV screen? Yep. What about digital out of home? Yep. What about apps? Yep. What about, I mean, name me a place. They can advertise anywhere at any time, product placement, in feed, on, AR, on augmented reality, the complexity of what their options are is virtually unlimited. And so as a result, we continually have to have measurement get better so that we can keep up with that. If at some point that complexity stops and you say, that's it, no more new formats, no more new, walled gardens, no more new any of that. I think we would actually see, get to a place where we'd say, okay, we more or less have solved how to do this. But the problem is there's continually a new format. There's continually a new platform. I remember 20 years ago going to an event, and Jerry Yang, who was the co-founder of Yahoo, said something that I'll never forget that I've repeated since, which is every 5 years or so, there's a new consumer application that didn't exist 5 years before that. And if you actually go back to the beginning of the internet, almost 30 years ago, you can see it from Hotmail and AOL and Prodigy and they don't all succeed, but you can see it all the way through, Yahoo and Snapchat and Pinterest and TikTok and now maybe Sora 2 and whatever comes next. There will be something in 5 years that didn't exist today and that none of us had any idea, and it'll be top of mind for all of us. And I think that means that measurement is always going to have to evolve and continually get better. But it's a fun challenge, and I also think as long as humans are a part of it, we haven't fully mapped how we make decisions. We don't fully understand why we do one thing versus another. We have some decent ideas, but are we ever going to get to a place where we fully know if you show this ad in exactly this order, even if we theoretically could do that, I don't know that we'd want to, but let's say we could show exactly this ad in exactly this order and exactly this sequence, exactly this, sort of the perfect utopia of advertising. There would still be, I think, an aspect to it on the human side that we couldn't control. And so I think that's going to always be hard. Now, I do think there's a new area, which is AI agents. And if we all personally we've talked about agentic, meaning like companies interacting with each other, but what about personal agents? Your agent, Luckett, your agent, or Daevid, your agent that goes out on your behalf and makes decisions for you. How does advertising work through that lens? And if I'm selling a product, how do I sell to your agent in a sense? And what does that look like? I think it looks pretty different than what it looks like today. What does measurement look like in that realm? So I think we're going to have a number of issues that we have to figure out as an industry.
Jonah, just before we wrap up, we like to ask this question. If there is a piece of information or advice that you could give to your younger self or anybody else watching the show on getting into digital media and doing what you've done, what would it be?
Boy, what I would say is, in the end of the day, life and business are about people. And so as much excitement as there is about technology, and trust me, I am very excited about technology, none of it matters without the people. So the people are always the most important piece of it. And I think the decisions that we make about who we choose to work with, professionally and personally, matter. And so, being around people that are genuine, that work hard, that you like, that you trust. Trust, I think, is an absolutely critical component of this whole ecosystem. And so I would say get into it because you like the people, because you want to build relationships, because you want to be on the cutting edge of technology. But it's about the people in the end of the day. And I made this comment to someone else recently that on our deathbeds, we are not going to look back and say, I wish I had, run another programmatic ad campaign. That's not going to be the thing we say. We're going to talk about people and the impact of our children and our families and our parents and our loved ones on our life, and hopefully some small impact that we made on the world. I think that's what will matter in the end of the day. So it will always come back to people for me.
You know what? I just want to reflect on that. I feel like I know your brother Noah and your father, who's a philosopher, which is just, wonderful to know that is actually, you don't just speak it, you actually live it as well. So thank you very much, Jonah Goodhart, for being on the show. Co-founder and CEO of Mobian. Really, what a great chat. And thanks again for being on the show. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks for having me, David and Luckett.
That was Jonah Goodhart, another amazing media technology leader who's so passionate about the industry and what he does.
I am absolutely inspired by what he's done in the media industry. I think just reflecting on a couple of key points that he talked to us about was, having a really big impact on the way DoubleClick was ad serving at the time, and managing or changing the way priority settings for campaign serving was delivered, was instrumental in the way Programmatic came about as well. I think that trading element was so important. And I think also one of the other areas that we're starting to see more of, and as video starts to take shape in the digital media space, just being able to analyze video at that, I want to say down to the frame rate or down to each frame, and the way that he analyzed that or gave us those insights, I think is really important for the way that we move forward. It's just going to be, I think the world of video is just going to be amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so good having these types of thought leaders and people that have been on as part of the media industry for such a long time. We're getting these kind of history lessons, as it were, and that's been super exciting. And especially, Moat was a company that really kind of changed what was happening in measurement. I remember back in 2012, 2013, having conversations with my old boss, Sammy Lowe, about the goal of being able to actually measure viewability, and then along came Moat. So that's truly being a part of that evolution of the industry, and as we talked about, measurement and attribution being just this kind of constant through line of challenges that we've been trying to solve for such a long time now. So it's great to see and meet people like Jonah who are really kind of trying to solve those problems and doing innovative things and using the latest technology, now AI-powered everything, to try to solve the problems of today. So a great conversation. Thanks, Jonah, for coming on board and chatting with us today. And for everybody else, thank you for joining us. And as always, keep questioning where media is headed and who's defining the future.
I'm Georgia Bremer, APAC General Manager for Innovid and previously Flash Talking. Join me next on Media Tech Talk as I take you through how we've brought together two adtech powerhouses, connecting the precision of data with the emotion of storytelling to make television advertising smarter, measurable, and yes, more personal. Join me in the conversation that's inspiring media minds. That's next on Media Tech Talk.